Hello everyone, Jacob here. In the last lesson we talked about this structure right here, as much as. And we went through a lot of different ways to use it. And in fact, there was so much to talk about that I had to divide the lesson into 2 lessons. And today I'm just going to kind of pick up where I left off and talk about some other things that you can put after as much as. All of the examples we saw before, it was either a noun, 명사, or a pronoun, 대명사. But you don't always have to use a noun or a pronoun. You can use some other stuff. You can put some other things after as much as. So right here it says as much as possible, as much as I can, as much as I thought, or as much as I expected. All right? And what do these mean? As much as possible, 가능한 만큼. As much as I can, 할 수 있는 만큼. As much as I thought, 생각한 or 생각만큼. And then as much as I expected, 기대만큼. Okay? So let's go ahead and look at some examples. I'm just going to do 2 examples because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's important to know just these kinds of things because they're just super useful and practical. So let's look at our first example, which is going to be talking about these 2, which are very similar. I eat as much as possible. I eat as much as possible at all you can eat, at all you can eat restaurants. What is an all you can eat restaurant? Well, in Korean you say buffet, a buffet restaurant, which I think is possible in English too, but I like to say this, an all you can eat restaurant. A restaurant where you can eat as much as you can, all you can eat. All right, so here we're saying as much as possible, or we could even say as much as I can. Both are fine. As much as possible or as much as I can. Both have very similar meanings, right? So let's go ahead and look at an example using these endings right here. Japan wasn't as expensive. Japan wasn't as expensive as I thought. Japan wasn't as expensive as I thought. Or Japan wasn't as expensive as I expected. When I went to Japan, I expected it to be ridiculously expensive. Very, very expensive. And it was pretty expensive, but it wasn't as expensive as I expected. Not as expensive as I thought. All right, so these are just some really good endings to kind of memorize whenever you're using this structure right here, as much as. All right, let's look at some other endings that are useful. When you're using this as much as structure, some other endings that are useful, 뭐뭐뭐 as much as, you can say 뭐뭐뭐 as much as, and then you can say before. Okay, what else can you say? You can say 뭐뭐뭐 as much as, 뭐뭐뭐 ago. You can say 뭐뭐뭐 as much as in or on or during, these prepositions of time, right? Or you could even say 뭐뭐뭐 as much as and then when plus a full sentence. All right, so this is going to be actually to use this as much as structure to compare kind of 2 periods of time. And let's go ahead and look at some examples. The first one is quite simple. I'm not as angry as before. I'm not as angry as before. So here we're using this as much as or as adjective as with before. Okay, let's look at how to use it with this right here. People don't buy CDs as much as 20 years ago. This is very true. I never buy any CDs at all anymore. I'm a pretty bad person. I just download them. But some people still buy CDs, but most people don't buy CDs anymore. People just don't buy CDs as much as 20 years ago. Okay? All right, let's keep going. What's our next example? The economy didn't grow, the economy didn't grow as much as in 2010. All right, I think this is true. I tried to follow economic news, and I'm pretty sure the economy didn't grow as much as in 2010. Okay, let's look at our last example using this one, using this ending. My father isn't as tall as when he was 20, which unfortunately is, I think, the sad case for everyone. When you get older, you tend to get a little bit smaller. My father isn't as tall as when he was 20. In fact, I've noticed that he's gotten a little bit smaller since I've kind of been an adult. Anyway, so here again, all of these are good examples because we are not just comparing two things, but we're comparing two periods of time. So this is just a really good way to use this as much as structure. All right, I want to talk about one last way to use this structure, and then we'll be done. So, what is that? We can say to be as much of a noun, to be as much of a noun as okay? So this is actually a usage of as much as that a lot of Korean people don't know, and I want to kind of explain it. So let's look at our first example. Michael Jackson is, or actually I should say was, because he died. Michael Jackson was as much of a genius. Michael Jackson was as much of a genius as Mozart. I don't know if you agree with this, but some people think that Michael Jackson was as much of a genius as Mozart. So what are we saying here? In Korean, I think you would just say 모차트만큼 Michael Jackson이 천재였다. But in English, we can kind of use this. We can say Michael Jackson was as much of a genius as Mozart, okay? So you have to say to be as much of a noun as 뭐뭐뭐. But you need to be careful because you can't use it with any noun. You have to use it with only certain nouns. You can only use it with nouns that kind of have a degree. You can say he was a really big genius, or you could say like Mozart was more of a genius, or you could say Michael Jackson was more of a genius. Steve Jobs was more of a genius than someone, right? So only with nouns like these where you can kind of, there's some kind of degree. There's really big geniuses and kind of smaller geniuses, right? So let's look at another example, and then we'll move on. So the business wasn't as much of a success as I thought. The business wasn't as much of a success as I thought, or as I expected. So here we're using the noun success, and it works with this structure because you can say it was a really big success, or it was just a success, or it was a small success. You could even say that. So there's a degree of success. There's big success, there's normal success, there's small success. So you can say the business wasn't as much of a success as I thought, and that makes sense. So this is a really good usage of this as much as structure, but you have to be careful because again, you can only use it with these kinds of nouns where you can kind of express a degree, okay? I just want to give you one last warning, and then we are going to be done with this as much as structure. When you want to say 뭐뭐뭐 할 만큼, you cannot use the as much as structure. Okay, a lot of Korean people make mistakes doing this, but you just need to be careful. 할 만큼 in English has a completely different structure. All right, and I'm going to tell you real quick. We say actually to the point that, subject, verb, object, Okay, and I'm actually going to talk about this structure right here in the next lesson. So keep watching, and I'll see you next time.